It's Wednesday, July 22nd. My name's Juan. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel, and today we're going to discuss the opening of the public docket, all the factual information that the NTSB has so far regarding the Dale Earnhardt Cessna Citation Latitude jet crash at Elizabethtown, not sure the pronunciation on that, Tennessee, back on 15 August of 2019. We'll go into greater detail on this information once I get home, but just a cursory review of the interview by the pilots and the systems of the Cessna Latitude citation we can talk about right now. Do you remember the old rock and roll song, Should I Stay or Should I Go? When making your decision to go around or abort a landing, go ugly early. Make that decision early. The earlier you make that decision and stand by that decision, the better chances the outcome will be. If you change your mind halfway through the procedure, chances are you'll end up in an accident. When you're learning to fly small airplane, you do touch and goes all the time, and the procedure is fairly straightforward. In the airline industry, well, and in the military, we also did touch and goes in the actual jet to get our training proficiency up. But in the airline industry, flying the actual jet for training purposes is prohibitively expensive, so we do all our training in the simulator. Since our training is all done in the simulator can magically reset you after you land and go on to the next maneuver. So you rarely even do a touch and go even in the simulator. And one of the most, and a few years ago, Emirates Airlines had a disaster with a 777 aircraft where they attempted to do a go-around after the aircraft touched down. The FO inadvertently retracted the gear too early. The aircraft settled back down on the runway, and they lost the aircraft. I believe everybody, or most everybody, survived on that accident. But as a result of that accident, there has been a return emphasis onto performing the maneuver of doing a touch and go after the aircraft touches down on the runway. And having practiced this myself in the 777 in the simulator, there's a lot to consider. So the crew of the Dale Earnhardt flight had two fairly experienced crew members, one crew member with about 11,000 hours, the other crew member with about 5,000 hours. It sounds like the crew member with 5,000 hours was doing the landing, and they would often swap seats, left seat versus right seat. They were both left seat qualified in the Cessna Citation. They took off on a VFR flight plan to a short VFR flight to Elizabethtown and did a VFR approach and landing to runway 24. Runway 24 is a 5,000 foot runway. They calculated they needed about a 3,000 foot landing distance for their given load in this aircraft. Runway 24 does not have a visual approach slope indicator. It does not have an instrument approach back up to that approach. They simply just did a VFR approach and landing. This runway does have a very slight downhill slope. The approach into runway 24 appears to be slightly unstable in that the crew was fast. They did touch down on the numbers, but they touched down hard and fast. As a result, the aircraft bounced. It bounced up into the air. Somehow, during that first bounce on the numbers, the crew managed to get the thrust reversers into reverse. Now, remember, the thrust reversers on these jet aircraft, it doesn't mean that the jet engines literally start spinning backwards. It means it electrically actuates and hydraulically operates a pair of clamshell doors that open up, that takes the thrust from moving it through the engine and kicks it out forward of the engine to help slow the aircraft down. These thrust reversers are controlled by three squat switches. These are switches on the landing gear that need to sense that the aircraft is on the ground before these thrust reversers will deploy. Somehow this crew got the thrust reversers deployed, and then the aircraft bounced back up in the air, completely confusing the thrust reverser logic system. Now there appears to be a bit of systems misunderstanding by the crew members. A thrust reverser unlocked in flight in a jet is a very serious matter, and it has brought down aircraft before in the past. I believe a C-5 during the Vietnam era, the Orphan airlift was brought down by a TR unlock light. So in the Cessna Citation design, they have simplified the procedure. Basically, if you get a TR unlock in flight, you need to shut that engine down quickly. So in the Cessna Citation jet, they have simplified that system to where if the aircraft senses a thrust reverser unlocked in flight, it will automatically bring that engine down to idle RPM. At some point after the thrust reverser was deployed and the aircraft came down for a second bounce, at some point along this sequence, the crew decided to go around. They put the power forward, and the logic of the squat switch and thrust reverser system prevented, well, the engines began to accelerate and then went to idle. So in the interview with the pilots, they mentioned that they went to go around, but there was no power. Well, that's because that's how the system works in this situation. Somewhere after the second bounce and the lack of thrust, the crew decided, we got to put this thing on the ground and get it stopped. They did one final third hard landing onto the runway, well down past midfield of the runway, hard enough to collapse the right main landing gear and send the aircraft skidding off the end of the runway into the fence. The crew and the passengers then had some difficulty with the emergency egress out of the aircraft, but were eventually able to safely evacuate the aircraft before it burned. They were very lucky. So the bottom line is you got to make your decision to go around early. You can do a go around after the aircraft has touched the ground, but you cannot really do a go around after the aircraft has touched the ground and you are in reverse thrust. Unless you have 10,000 feet of runway and a 3,000 foot runway length and you got enough distance basically to do a stop and go, once the thrust reversers are deployed, you're committed. So we can do a more detailed review of this accident with all the diagrams that are available in the NTSB report. I'm just going to give you a link to the lengthy NTSB report here and give you a chance to peruse through it. Lots to learn here. We're here in Colorado Springs. We're at 4,000 miles on our Western Tattenback 2020 run, heading back to the west. After 4,000 miles, we've worn out our tires, so we're going to go get a new set of tires and then head up over the Colorado passes and enjoy our time through Colorado, taking the dirt roads, back roads, all the way back to California along the Trans-American Trail. Thanks for your support. Thanks so much for your support over on Patreon and staying with us as we take this time off to do this Trans-American Trail. See you here. More updates on that as well.